Man, here we go. We're doing it, internet. Do you hear me, internet? Yes, it looks like you do. Yes, it looks like you do. How is everybody? Welcome to Get Your News On with Ron. I still have a little bit of a cold, but what are you gonna do? It's that time of the year. The sharp weather contrast still gets me, Even in a place like Southern California, it still kind of gets me. Started creeping in a little bit Sunday, and then really went full throttle yesterday and today. But I feel like it's running its course. I feel like I'm in that zone where it's like waking up is rough. Like you wake up and you're like, oh man, but then you realize you're like, nah, dude, you just gotta start moving, start taking your vitamins, take little Dayquil, and that's what you gotta do. You gotta keep moving. If I stay still, it takes longer to run its course. If I'm moving, it runs its course faster. Are you like that? I feel like some people are like that, some people not so much. I've kind of always been that way. So anyway, happy to be here. If my voice seems a little raspy or nasally at times, please excuse me. Battling a little bit of a cold, but there's a lot happening in the world that's exciting. Like one thing, the Chicago teacher strike ended. And lo and behold, it was a pretty successful strike. Isn't that interesting? These strikes, whenever the teachers strike, they usually get a lot of what they want. Do they get every single thing? Not typically. And this is no exception. We're going to get into the specifics about what they got in Chicago, but they get a fair amount of what they want. Pretty much every time a strike has happened in recent years, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Chicago, Indiana. And yet you don't hear the corporate media talk about teacher strikes very much. You don't hear this amplified very often. You usually have to go to shows like this to hear about teacher strikes. Los Angeles, by the way, another successful teacher strike. And why is that? Well, because the powers that be know that strikes, much like the common cold, which I'm dealing with at the moment, is very contagious, but contagious in a good way. It will spread, and it will spread quick. You know what else spreads quickly? Municipal broadband internet. A town in Massachusetts got it, and a bunch of other towns are trying to get it too. But you don't hear this stuff reported on, do you? And it's for a reason. So Christina shares this. Thank you for sharing this, Christina. Christina's in the Midwest. She's always on top of what's going on there. And here are the results of the teacher strike. This is according to Vox. So let me scroll up to the headline there. The 11-day teacher strike in Chicago, it paid off. It got more than $30 million extra for public schools. All right, let's see exactly what they got. So the teachers returned to school on Friday after going on strike for 11 days. Now, I hate to nitpick, but couldn't you just have given the kids the rest of the weekend? Really, 11 days. You really got to go back on a Friday. Be like, let's just regroup on a Monday. The teachers are happy. Everything's cool. But you still get that long weekend. And I know the kids aren't winning here. I know they got to make it up in the summertime, which Chicago, you really cherish those summer days. Chicago winters are absolutely brutal. Some of the most brutal winters I've ever experienced was some of the time I've spent in winter in Chicago. That lake effect, it goes right through your bones. So I know that they have to spend time in school in summer now. That's how they'll make it up. But I don't know, one more day. Was that really going to make or break anything? Just give them the weekend. Be like, all right, you got the weekend to really recoup and reconcile that come Monday, you're going to be doing math again. It's going to happen. Just bear with it. That was, I don't want to say math was my least favorite subject, which I wish that wasn't the case. But, if we're being honest, I think, I really never really connected with science in school, which is a bummer because science is so interesting. But, and I don't want to blame the way it was taught, although that might have something to do with it. But I just never connected with it in the classroom. Now, I was curious about a lot of stuff outside of the classroom, but in the classroom, I just never connected with it. I never took a science class in college. because I never, I always struggled with it in high school. Anyway, all right. So, but nonetheless, they said Friday, you're coming back. That's what's going to happen. So they had picketed in the snow and rain until union leaders and city officials struck a deal. All right. So here's what they have. First of all, they're getting a nurse and a social worker in each school. So here, this sentence is a little interesting. City officials struck a deal to raise teacher pay and to put a social worker and nurse in each school, which they were calling for more social workers and nurses. So this leads me to believe that I guess some schools didn't have one or both of those things, which is kind of disturbing. I guess some schools didn't have a nurse, didn't have a social worker. Now, I know a lot of schools only have a part-time nurse, but to not have a nurse at all, anyway, that's a little concerning. Some of the teachers' most ambitious proposals, such as requiring the city to expand affordable housing, didn't make the cut. You know why? Because you need more than just the teachers there. You need the city on board there. You need a general strike there. You need a general movement to demand renters' rights, to demand rent control. That's going to take more than just teachers. That's got to take citizens. That's got to take everybody. But anyway, here's what Jesse Sharkey, president of the Chicago Teachers Union, had to say about it. Did we accomplish every single little thing? No. But I can say we moved the needle on educational justice in the city. So here's what they got. The district committed to spending $35 million to shrink oversized classrooms and to prioritize schools that serve the most at-risk students. The deal includes a 16% pay raise for teachers over 5 years and a remarkable 40% raise for teaching assistants, clerks, and other low-paid workers. The new 5-year contract will also boost investment per pupil and reduce the number of students in each class. So, all in all, not half bad. In fact, they got a lot of what they wanted. Now, did they get more affordable housing in the city? They did not get that. But they got increases in the teacher pay. They got an increase in pay for staff and other workers. They got social workers and nurses in every school. And they got reduced class sizes. It's pretty solid. That's a win. Because that's what happens when you strike. When you strike, a lot of times you get what you want. Because guess what? Classrooms need teachers. They need teachers. In other countries, they really realize this. Other countries, they go on strike like that and they get what they want. But they have societies that allow that a lot easier. In the United States, striking is very difficult, and that is by design. When you are one paycheck away from not being able to afford rent, when you are one paycheck away from not being able to get groceries or your medicine, you can't think about, what if I go on strike? You can't wrap your head around that because you're like, look, I'm one paycheck away from going under and I have a family. A lot of people in the country are in that situation, and they're working multiple jobs just to survive. And our work culture is never ending. This is all by design. And they discourage striking by decimating unions. This is all by design. This is not coincidental. It's not coincidental that it is infinitely harder to strike in the United States than it is in a place like Germany, who, by the way, they have a 28.5-hour work week now because they go on strike. So, I get it. It's easier said than done, but strikes still very effective. Here we have yet another teacher strike that worked out for the teachers. So far, it's batting 1,000. We have covered the Indiana strike. We've covered the Los Angeles strike. We've covered the Chicago strike the first time around. We covered Oklahoma, West Virginia. Every single time, positive results for the teachers. Every single time, with no exceptions. But you don't hear about, if the corporate media spent an inch of time on stuff like this, strikes would spread like wildfire, which I'm in California. That's a bad analogy to use. Not a good analogy to use in California, but it's a figure of speech. Sorry. But they're not going to. The media is not going to cover stuff like this because they don't want everybody striking. That upsets the status quo, which is what the media is in place to preserve. They should just rename the corporate media status quo defenders because that's who they're defending. And that's what they're defending. All right. But good job, Chicago teachers. That is some good news. All right. Here, let's move on to some not so good news. We got some good news and some not so good news. We'll do the not so good news first. And then we'll end with the good news. So, this is happening. And Christina shared that last story, by the way. And Edwin shares this story. So, Edwin, thank you for sharing this. This is from The Guardian. Climate crisis. 11,000 scientists warn of untold suffering. 11,000 scientists gathered at a kegger and were like, let's talk about the untold suffering. And everyone was like, this is really a drag and a pretty lame party, quite frankly. Statement sets out vital signs as indicators of the magnitude of the climate emergency. The world's people face untold suffering due to climate crisis unless there are major transformations to global society, according to a stark warning from more than 11,000 scientists. We declare clearly and unequivocally that planet Earth is facing a climate emergency. To secure a sustainable future, we must change how we live. This entails transformations in the ways our global society functions and interacts with natural ecosystems. There is no time to lose. The climate crisis has arrived and is accelerating faster than most climate scientists expected. It is very severe. All right. So this statement was published in the Journal of Bioscience, so nobody will read it. You know, and again, this should be the headline everywhere, every day. At least the Guardian's reporting on this. But this should be, you know, when they do those dumb TikToker things at the bottom of screens and on cable news, it should just be like climate emergency. We need to act now. We are grossly behind. And by the way, the Trump administration has officially begun pulling out of the Paris Agreement. What little things we were doing, we're trying to unroll that when we are behind schedule. We have an emergency. We had an emergency yesterday. But instead, stuff like that is just published in academic journals, which, with all due respect, I'm not trying to bash academic journals, but the reality is hardly anybody reads those. It's going to be read by a group of your peers. I have been published in an academic journal myself. I guarantee that has been read by 5 people. Maybe. And honestly, I haven't read the fucking thing. You can find it if you look hard enough. Google my name, Ron Placone, and the Journal of Contemporary Rhetoric, and I'm pretty sure you will find my article. It's still floating out there somewhere. But anyway, okay. So scientists say that the urgent changes needed include ending population growth, leaving fossil fuels in the ground, halting forest destruction, and slashing meat eating. Professor William Ripple of Oregon State University and the lead author of the statement said he was driven to initiate it by the increase in extreme weather he was seeing. Okay. So here is the troubling signs. Air transport, billions of passengers increasing. Meat production increasing. World population increasing. Encouraging signs, divestments, assets divested from fossil fuels is increasing from 2013 till now. Carbon pricing increasing, and fertility rate, births per women, is decreasing. A broader set of indicators should be monitored, including human population growth, meat consumption, tree cover loss, energy consumption, fossil fuel subsidies, and annual economic losses due to extreme weather events. Other profoundly troubling signs from human activity selected by the scientists include booming air passenger numbers and world GDP growth. The climate crisis is closely linked to excessive consumption of the wealthy lifestyle, they said. As a result of these human activities, there are especially disturbing trends of increasing land and ocean temperatures, rising sea levels, and extreme weather events, the scientists said. Despite 40 years of global climate negotiations, with few exceptions, we have largely failed to address this predicament. Especially worrisome are the potential irreversible climate tipping points. These climate chain reactions could cause significant disruptions to ecosystems, society, and economies, potentially making large areas of Earth uninhabitable. Okay, so here are some of the needed actions. Now, one critique I'll have of this right here, they seem to focus on a lot of individual actions here. The reality of the situation, though, and I'm pretty sure these scientists know this, the most polluting companies on the planet, factory farms, Amazon, the oil and gas companies, they need to be stopped. That's the biggest thing here. That's the biggest thing. They need to be stopped. Somebody who takes a vacation once a year and gets on a plane for it, if they stop doing that, that's not a big picture solution here. I mean, if you can minimize the amount you fly, that's great. That's cool. I'm not saying that's not a good thing to do. Try to seek as many energy efficient transportation solutions as you can. And I am somebody who does have to travel for a job. That's part of how I make my living. And I do the best I can on that. I take trains when I can. I seek alternative solutions when I can, as often as I can. So I get all that, and that's all well and good. But if we don't stop these polluting companies and seek better overall solutions, then these are barely drops in the bucket compared to what these companies are doing. All right, so here's the urgently needed actions according to this article. Use energy far more efficiently and apply strong carbon taxes to cut fossil fuel use. Now, again, this has got to be applied on the companies. We got to stop the drilling. We got to stop the fossil fuel use. We got to end these companies' reigns. Stabilize global population, currently growing by 200,000 people a day, using ethical approaches such as longer education for girls. I'm not sure what that sentence means exactly. Stabilize global using ethical approaches such as longer education for girls. Okay. And the destruction of nature and restore forests and mangroves to absorb CO2. Now, again, these are the companies. We have to end deforestation that these companies are doing. Eat mostly plants and less meat and reduce food waste. And while we're at it, let's end factory farming. Let's reinvest in the way we do our agriculture. We shouldn't be consuming the meat from factory farming anyway. It is unhealthy. It is immoral. And it's just really gross. All right. Shift economic goals away from GDP growth. The good news is that such transformative change with social and economic justice for all promises far greater human well-being than does business as usual. If we did all this, we'd have healthier lives. In short, if we did all this, we'd have healthier lives. But again, the main polluters, the main culprits are these huge corporations. They're the ones we cannot allow them to pursue business as usual. It's awesome that we do as much as we can as individuals. It's awesome to recycle. It's awesome to compost. I do all those things. I'm sure you do too. It's awesome to be mindful of your diet. Those are all great things. Those are all great things that we're doing as individuals, and that's great. But if these companies do nothing, we're still screwed. If we allow these companies to operate as usual, we're still screwed. Just saying. So to make it out like it's all on people with no power is absolutely ridiculous. All right. But anyway, interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing this, Edwin. All right. Let's see. So we'll go to electoral politics for a minute. We actually don't have a lot of electoral politics stories today, which is, to me, very refreshing, actually. It's actually very refreshing. And somebody brings up how they don't talk about population growth. I agree. They don't. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think there's a stigma around talking about, the idea that, I mean, and hey, I got some firsthand experience. And if anyone's in my situation, you probably do too, where it's like, I'm about to get married. Me and my fiance aren't 100% decided on children, but we're definitely leaning towards no for a number of reasons. One, our lifestyle would not be an easy environment to raise a child in. Two, factors like climate change and population growth, where it's like, gee, and it's hard to wag your finger at people who want to continue the species and give another generation a chance at life. But there's some huge concerns here as to what kind of life are you giving them? What kind of future are they going to have? There are some grave concerns. So it's not very fun dinner time conversation. So I get that. And anyway, I think that's why there's still a big stigma around population growth. And it's hard to even have those basic conversations where it's like, hey, if you're going to populate the planet, maybe don't have a ton of kids. Maybe just have one or two. Those aren't easy conversations to have. I get it. Anyway, so this is something that's going on in the Sanders campaign. As examples mount, and Tim shares this. Tim, thank you very much for sharing this. As examples mount, Sanders campaign accuses corporate media of deliberate attempt to erase Bernie. All these examples are no accident, says David Sirota. So Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign alleged Monday that corporate media outlets are intentionally ignoring and attempting to undermine his gains in recent polls in a way that's cartoonishly inaccurate. Which is, by the way, true. They will have polls, and we talked about this recently on the Jimmy Dore Show. They will have polls where Bernie is leading. CNN recently just straight up lied about poll results. Bernie Sanders was up. They switched Elizabeth Warren with Bernie Sanders and made it look like Elizabeth Warren was up when she wasn't. It was actually Bernie Sanders. They misreported their own poll on purpose. Well, I guess we don't know 110% for sure it was on purpose, but come on. And when they show the results of polls, what they have in the headline, there will be a poll where Bernie is winning. And they'll be like, Biden and Elizabeth Warren are making a run. In fact, I think they show a picture of all that. Okay, so here, let's go to this. So Ryan Grimm tweeted this. CNN has 5 articles up about its New Hampshire poll that shows Sanders in front, yet none of the 5 say that in the headline. So this was a poll where Sanders was in front. Here's the headlines. Buttigieg in 4th, but a strong 4th. And by the way, if Pete Buttigieg loses to Trump, it'll be a strong loss. This is a historically unprecedented New Hampshire mess. That's what they said about a poll where Bernie was winning. Early state primary voters much more undecided than voters nationally. A disappointing poll for Biden. Is that all? Yeah. So that's the headlines that they used on polls where Bernie was winning. Bernie was winning these polls. Those are the headlines that they used. That is unbelievable. All right, let's see if we can go back to the article here. No, going back and forth. That's pretty neat. Here's another one. Journalist Ken Klippenstein noted the phenomenon on Monday in response to the Times poll that showed Warren and Sanders, given the margin of error, statistically tied. The newspaper's push notification tellingly left Sanders' name out entirely. All right, so here's that. So this poll showed that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders were tied. Here's what their notification said. Elizabeth Warren is leading a tight Iowa caucus. Warren is actually very accurate. Elizabeth Warren is leading a tight Iowa caucus race, according to our new poll, while Pete Buttigieg is surging and Joe Biden is fading. Won't even mention Bernie's name. And by the way, this is successful squashing out of a candidate by corporate media. People who I know who follow politics a little less, like other comedians I know on Twitter and just, general people that I know that don't follow politics as closely, they're leading Bernie Sanders off the name. They're saying hopefully Elizabeth Warren can beat Trump. They're leaving Bernie Sanders out of this because the corporate media shoves stuff like this down people's throats so often. So often they leave Bernie's name out. They have misleading headlines for polls. They misreport the actual results of polls. And they cherry pick the polls that they amplify. The polls that are conducted on landlines where they don't survey anyone under 50, they'll report on those. The polls where Biden does well because of name recognition, they'll report on those. But other polls, they'll try to not mention that as much. So the Sanders campaign is finally responding. Let's see what all they're saying. So here's what David Sirota, who's with the Sanders campaign, had to say about it. All of these examples are no accident. This is a deliberate attempt to erase Bernie Sanders, but here's some news. We're not being erased. We're going to win. I certainly hope this can be overcome. I really do. And I certainly hope that David Sirota is right and Bernie wins. He's taking on the entire establishment, and he's taking on the corporate media, and he's taking on the DNC. But what does Bernie have? He has a progressive movement. He has a progressive movement that's bigger than the media will tell you it is. It's a lot bigger, because that's what happened in 2016. Bernie Sanders let all of us know we're not as alone as we thought we were. He was in the right place at the right time, and he let us know, hey, there's more of you than you realize. You're not as alone as you think. There's more people who feel the way you do. And it's not unrealistic to have a candidate who represents your point of view on a ballot. You know, I love it when people are just like, oh, all these Bernie Sanders supporters, they're so pushy. It's like, yeah, well, you know, the last time somebody who supports Bernie had a candidate who represented their point of view as a viable candidate who could potentially be president? Never. We had Dennis Kucinich in 2008. And we all knew he didn't, you know, we knew that Dennis didn't have a chance. So, and that's what I mean when I say viable, somebody who actually has a shot. I mean, yeah, of course, we've had Nader, but everyone knew Nader wasn't going to win. I mean, you know, we've never had a candidate that represents our point of view. We were just used to. That's why when people like Bill Maher say, oh, these lefties, they have no idea how to compromise. We've been compromising forever. I never thought I would have a candidate that represented my point of view on a ballot unless I moved to another country. In 2008, that's honestly what I thought. I honestly thought, I was just like, well, maybe someday. That's why, and this is another nitpick that I have, and I'm sure some of you guys disagree with me on this one, and that's fine. And it's not a big deal. It's just something that bugs me an incy bit. I don't like it when people refer to themselves as Bernie-crats or Tulsi-crats or any kind of insert person's name here, crat. Because to me, that says, oh, I follow this person and that's it. And progressive policies and that viewpoint had been around for a long time. I didn't get my point of view from Bernie Sanders. I had my point of view, and Bernie said, hey, there's actually a lot more of you, and we got a chance. So I'm not a Bernie-crat. Bernie didn't invent any of these ideas. They've been around for a very long time. And in other countries, they're taken for granted. In other countries, they're actually considered centrist in some ways, depending on the issue. So anyway, that's a small pet peeve of mine. Like it's like no, you didn't get you are a progressive, you are a lefty, and now finally there's a viable chance because there's more of us than we realize. So I'm glad that the Sanders campaign is speaking out on this. All right. Okay, so Ken shares this, and this is I wouldn't say this is good news. It's well, we'll just get to it because in a sense it is good news that anyway, enough preamble. Let me just get an alleged white supremacist was arrested in a thwarted synagogue attack in Colorado. So you see what I mean here. It's good news that they stopped this psychopath. It's bad news that this is the world we live in, you know? All right, so let's see. Ken shares this. Thank you for sharing this, Ken. Alleged white supremacist arrested in thwarted synagogue attack in Colorado. The FBI says, holy shit, that is a creepy-looking person. I mean, my goodness. Wow. That is a creepy-looking person. A man who repeatedly espoused anti-Semitic views has been arrested in a plot to bomb a historic Colorado synagogue, federal officials said Monday. The co-conspirators turned out to be undercover agents. Court documents say Richard Hulser was arrested Friday in Pueblo just after the agents brought him what were supposedly two pipe bombs along with dynamite to blow up Temple Emmanuel. In fact, the undercover agents had phony bombs incapable of causing damage. The agent said Hulser described the inert explosives as absolutely gorgeous. I can't imagine anybody doing that. Oh, wait, except for Brian Williams when he said, "I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons," and invoked Leonard Cohen's name when the United States was dropping bombs. Except our media, who does that all the time. But it's okay when you do that in the name of imperialism, I guess. All right. He had allegedly earlier made threatening comments about Pueblo's Jewish community, said he wanted to plot something that tells them they are not welcome in this town. Wow. So Hulser, 27, faces one count of attempting to obstruct religious exercise by force using explosives and fire, a federal hate crime. He made his first court appearance Monday to answer the charges officials described as domestic terrorism. Wow. So they said that the agents first learned of Hulser via a tip about his social media comments and determined he posed a threat to the Jewish community. A task force launched an investigation, and through their efforts, we thwarted an imminent threat to our community. An undercover FBI agent purporting to be a woman who supports white supremacy, they contacted him on Facebook, where he had allegedly used several accounts to promote white supremacist ideology and acts of racially motivated violence, according to the complaint. He allegedly made a reference to a racial holy war and said he was going to Temple Emmanuel to scope it out. The next day, he sent a video showing a woman outside the temple in which he used anti-Semitic language, according to the complaint. A video he allegedly sent earlier that day showed Nazi propaganda, knives, and masks. So I guess there's still some questions here as was he actually planning an attack, or did they just bring these things to him and say, we're going to do this? But this is a grossly disturbing situation on so many levels, on pretty much every level. It is grossly disturbing. Fortunately, no attack took place, but man, I mean, and it's one of those things we talk about. The beauty of the internet is everybody can find their circle. The horrific thing of the internet is everyone can find their circle. And, I remember when the synagogue shooting happened in Pittsburgh, we covered it on this show. I had just gotten back from leaving the country. And of course, Pittsburgh's my hometown. For anyone that doesn't know that, didn't hear me mention that in the past, Pittsburgh's my hometown. So, I was kind of scared because my dad goes to a bakery right near that synagogue oftentimes on Saturdays when the shooting took place. Fortunately, he wasn't in that area that day. And, I think I also mentioned that my mom had some coworkers who were part of that synagogue. That was their place of worship. And fortunately, they were not there. That actually the one of her colleagues, their son was there that day. Fortunately, he was okay. But I believe it was a very well-respected doctor in the community was among the casualties. And now, when I was just back in Pittsburgh last month, and now they're having discussions on whether or not they're going to reopen. And it's it's one of those heavy discussions to have because on one hand, it's, well, we don't want to, this place, such a brutal thing took place here. Maybe we need to move. But then on the other hand, it's like, well, if we don't reopen, are we sending the message that, hey, the shooter won? And, that's a tough, that's a tough line to walk. I certainly understand both perspectives there. I lean more towards reopen and say that our community as a whole is stronger than this. But I certainly understand the other perspective as well. But it's so gross that we live in this kind of a world where there's all these webs going on and stuff like this can happen. And yeah, we'll see this story. I mean, right now we just have this story to go on, so there's still a lot of details we're waiting for in this story. But the one thing we know absolutely for sure is that it is very, very disturbing. So we'll keep an eye on this. Thank you for sharing this, Kenneth. What's the frequency, Kenneth? Oops. There we go. Okay, so this last thing is kind of a bit of cool news, or a bit of hopeful news at the very least. And this is shared by Vampire Anarchy over on the Reddit subsection. Now, Vampire Anarchy, of course, is the form of anarchy where the only common accepted currency in communities is blood. Freaks me out a little bit. I get squeamish around blood, so I can never subscribe to Vampire Anarchy. But Vampire Anarchy leaves a lot of interesting articles on the Reddit subsection, which again, reddit.com/r/GetYourNewsOnWithRon. And here's something they had to say. Can plastic pavement curb the world's epidemic of plastic waste? Plastic Pavement would make an awesome band name. Now, there is a very popular alt indie band from the late 80s and 90s called Pavement. At least I think Pavement started in, it's not important. But anyway, Pavement, great band. I've been a Pavement fan for a long time. And that brings me to the song of the day, Cut Your Hair by Pavement. Cut your hair. No gimmicks there. Just cut your hair. Look it up. Pavement is the band there. If you've never listened to Pavement before, that's a great start. It's a super fun tune. One of my favorites. It's just one of those perfect indie pop songs, you know? Just fuzz guitars, great melodies, fun hooks, absurd, quirky lyrics. Just fun indie rock and roll music, remnant of the college indie of the late 80s and early 90s. And throughout. I mean, that was still being spun on college radio when I was there in the 2000s. So college rock at its finest, in my opinion. Pavement, Cut Your Hair, check it out. But Plastic Pavement, I don't know. I mean, I guess in some ways that'd be a little derivative if you called a band Plastic Pavement. But I feel like, I don't know. Could you get away with that? Could you not? I don't know. I mean, I'm not a musician. I feel like maybe you could, especially if Plastic Pavement were to become a thing. Because then not only is there a slight nod to the band Pavement, if you're a fan of that, but there's also a slight nod to an environmental solution here. Can plastic pavement curb the world's epidemic of plastic waste? 90% of the plastic we use ends up in landfills or in the world's oceans. Now, a Scottish firm has invented a way to recycle that hard-to-use plastic for a role that requires durability: paving roads and highways. The driveway at Christopher Boyle's 17th century English estate looks like regular asphalt and feels like regular asphalt, but it's not. It's paved with 21st century plastic trash. Plastic Trash could also be a cool band name. What if you called your band Plastic Trash and they were like, oh, are you? And it's like, well, we can use plastic trash to pave roads. And I think that's pretty cool. And then maybe you have at your shows, you can have pamphlets explaining how we can make plastic asphalt. I like it. It has all the ecological environmental benefits, but to your ordinary punter, you don't see any difference at all. It used the equivalents of 750,000 plastic bags and bottles ground up along with other hard-to-recycle plastic. The plastic flakes are mixed in at the plant in Scotland with MacRubber co-founder Toby McCarthy calls a secret ingredient. It's then bagged up and shipped to asphalt manufacturers. That blend replaces some of the black oil-based bitumen that keeps regular roads together. So instead of using these oil-based substances that are less environmentally sound, we can recycle plastics and use this. So I'm assuming, the one thing I'm assuming is they have something in here that prevents melting. That would be my first concern, that like under, you know, like, especially like I'm thinking Southern California, like our roads, when it gets really hot, places like Texas, stuff like that, I would be worried like plastics would melt. So I'd imagine that they have a way to prevent that from happening. Or maybe that's the thing they're really trying to figure out. Maybe in some environments, it's not quite durable enough yet. But this is pretty cool. Let's see if there's anything else here in this article that kind of sheds light on some of that. So the CBS News correspondent said, so is this a long-term solution to the world's plastic problem? Now McCartney, not Paul, a different one, is saying, I believe so. It's the stuff nobody else can use. It's destined for landfill, and we can take this plastic and we can recycle it in our roads. Now, environmentalists like Libby Peak are cautiously optimistic. They're potentially lower carbon than conventional roads, so that's very positive. What we don't know yet is how much microplastic these roads might shed. Now, McCartney said there are no microplastic presents in any of the roads that go down. Now, Sabiri asked, but shouldn't people just stop using plastic? I don't know whether that's ever really going to happen. He said for now, plastic pavement can curb the world's plastic epidemic. So he thinks more people haven't paved road with plastic because they aren't aware of the new option. So that's interesting. And that's, I mean, and even if we do curb our plastic use, which we should do, I do think that's still good. We still have so much of it out there in circulation, so much of it that's destined for a landfill. Imagine if we could take some of that and recycle it and put it back in our roads as a substitute for something that's oil-based. That'd be huge. But I think there are some microplastic concerns. I get that. I would say maybe the best way to unroll it is try it in moderate climates first. I know they mentioned Scotland. Try it there first, see what happens. And then experiment with different technologies. See like at what level it melts, at what it doesn't, what kind of durability it has, run controlled experiments. And then maybe you can really unroll that, pun intended, all over the world. Very interesting. So still some concerns, but it would be amazing if we could kind of reuse all that plastic that's already out there. All right. So thank you for sharing that, Vampire Anarchy. Let me see what you guys are saying. Let's see. Nate's Liver, guess you missed it, Ron, but Yang's giving everyone $1,000 a month, so saving the planet isn't a thing anymore. That's right. With $1,000 a month, we can all just move to Mars. I forgot about that. I did forget about that. Guys, tour dates, I got them. We are going to Australia very soon. Do not wait. Get your tickets. Do not wait. Get your tickets. November 14th, Melbourne. November 15th, Adelaide. November 17th, November 17th, Sydney. And November 22nd, Perth. There's the cold meds kicking in. I'm mixing up my dates. 14th, Melbourne. 15th, Adelaide. 17th, Sydney. 22nd, Perth. Get your tickets now. Don't wait. Cannot wait. Heading to Australia. Yes. Also, December 13th, Ventura Harbor Comedy Club. December 14th, the Dojo Comedy Sycamore Tavern right here in Los Angeles. Grandmother and myself are going to be gearing up for our 2020 tour dates. We're touring a lot in 2020, and we're gearing up for that right here in the Southern California area. And 2020 dates, there are some tickets available now. February 8th, Tucson, Arizona, tickets available now. March 12th, Orlando, Florida. March 14th, Miami, Florida. April 10th, I will be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. April 24th, Seattle, Washington. April 25th, Portland, Oregon. All those tickets are available now, and we should have more tickets available soon, and we're coming at you. Keep your eyes and ears open. If you want to support this show on the sustainability end, please do consider becoming a patron. Patreon.com/Ron Placone. For a Give What You Can level, you get an exclusive stream once a week for patrons only. You get my album for download. You can download my album in its entirety. You get full stand-up clips not available anywhere else. You get dialogues between myself and my cat, Lucy. All kinds of fun stuff for a Give What You Can level over on patreon.com/Ron Placone. You help me expand the show, have more guests, which I'm going to be having a guest today, by the way. I'll be back on in an hour. If it's your day to vote, get out and vote. Go do it. Man, they make it so easy to find out information on local elections. I had to dig in a couple different places to make sure that I wasn't supposed to vote today. Because California, it's not a big statewide thing in California today, but there are some districts that have some special elections and so forth. I had to make sure that I wasn't on that today. Anyway, Ray Foley, thank you very much for the Super Chat contribution. Ray, have a great trip. Thank you very much, Ray. And thank you very much for the Super Chat contribution. And thank you to Vampire Anarchy and Christina and Tim and Edwin and Ken for the story contributions today. I know some of you guys sent stuff I did not get to. I get to as much as I can. But thank you all for sending your stories today and for building this show. I know what's going on in the world now thanks to you guys. I didn't know otherwise. That's how this show works. You tweet me stuff, and that's what we talk about. Thank you so much for being part of this. I'll be back tomorrow, Same time, same channel, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And we got an interview coming up in about an hour. Tune in for that, or at least we should be. You know the drill. I'll be tweeting it. Look out for that. So I'll see you soon. And if not soon, today, I'll see you tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific time, right here on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, wherever you get this. And in the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy says meow. I say peace. Peace.